paralyzed Apache lady thrown into the river by way of her personal tribe until one cowboy dove in to save her. Before we dive into the story, do not forget to just like the video and inform us in the comments in which you're watching from. The sky over the Verde River hung low and heavy, the kind that promised extra cold earlier than dusk. The land became soaked from days of rain, the earth gentle and slick underfoot. Cole Madron labored alongside the fence line that ran close to the water's area, driving nails in a submit he had cut himself ultimate fall. The paintings kept his palms busy, and he wanted that, seeing that leaving the path riding jobs and the existence of a hired gun behind, silence had been each a consolation and a punishment. At 38, Cole had discovered to live with the quiet. He offered this small patch of land 2 years in the past after walking far away from the type of violence that left a person hollow. Out right here, there were no gunfights, no debts, no names he needed to don't forget. Simply the land, the river, and the sound of his hammer hitting wood. He'd been at it for the reason that morning. Sweat and rain blending on his brow when the wind shifted, and something faint cut via it. It turned into a cry. He froze, the hammer nevertheless in his hand. It wasn't the groan of a tree or an animal. It changed into human, a female's voice, remote, thin, and determined. He grew to become closer to the river. The modern day moved rapid, brown and swollen, wearing sticks and branches in its pole. At the start, he saw not anything. Then a flicker of motion, a flash of fabric. An arm breaking the floor earlier than being dragged below again. Cole did not suppose twice. He dropped the hammer and ran. The dust almost took his boots, the slope slick from the typhoon, but he driven tougher, heart pounding in opposition to his ribs. Whilst he reached the financial institution, there has been no sign of her, simply the roar of the modern. Then he saw it once more. Dark hair, a shoulder, the faintest movement of a hand. He kicked off his coat and dove. The water was ice bloodless, surprising enough to Scouse borrow his breath. It clawed his chest and throat, but he fought through, pulling hard towards the modern day. The river was more potent than it appeared. Every stroke felt heavier, slower. He spotted her once more, caught against a tangle of reeds near the far band. Her head rolled lower back, mouth barely above the floor. He reached her, wrapped one arm around her chest, and kicked toward shore. The weight of her moist get-dress dragged them down, but he hung on. By the point he pulled her onto the muddy bank, his lungs burned and his fingers shook from effort. He became her over, pressing his ear near. There has been a heartbeat, faint, choppy. He pushed lightly on her lower back, forcing water out. She coughed, gasped, and pulled in a susceptible breath. Easy, he stated, voice hoarse, you're safe. Her eyes opened, dark brown, glassy looking. She attempted to move, however her legs failed to respond. Cole saw panic in her face earlier than she found out it herself. Her fingers slapped to the ground, trying to push up. However, her decreased frame stayed nevertheless. Her respiratory quickened, turning shallow. It's all proper, he said quietly. You're hurt. Do not fight it. She stared at him, lips trembling, trying to talk. What came out became damaged English mixed with Apache. No walk, no stroll. He understood enough. The phrases hit him more difficult than he anticipated. He'd visible men crippled in falls or shot off horses. How fast worry may want to change into shame. She became young, perhaps mid-20s, her face putting even underneath the mud and bloodless. Long black hair clung to her neck and shoulders, her dress torn and heavy with water. Whoever she turned into, she hadn't fallen into the river with the aid of accident. He appeared upriver, 1/2 anticipating to peer others, riders, a camp, whatever. But there has been nobody, handiest the wind and the gray line of bushes. You are coming with me, he said, sliding his hands below her. She didn't resist, simply closed her eyes as he lifted her, her frame become limp, however trembling from cold. The climb back up the ridge was slow, each step preventing gravity and exhaustion. He stopped once to trap his breath, feeling her pulse faintly in opposition to his chest. She whispered something in her language, a name, maybe a prayer, and went still again. By the time they reached the cabin, his arms were numb. He kicked the door open and afterward the cop with the aid of the wall. The fire had nearly burned out, so he threw in wood until the flames stuck, filling the room with a dry snap of heat. He fetched a blanket, stripped off his moist blouse, and wrapped it round her shoulders. Her pores and skin became light from cold, her lips nearly colorless. While she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "Why you help?" Cole checked out her for a protracted second. "River's no location to die," he stated clearly. He gave her water, held the cup whilst her arms shook an excessive amount to grip it. She attempted to thank him, however her voice broke midway through. While she grew to become her face away, he noticed the tears, small, silent, and brief. He didn't ask questions, now not but. He only stirred the fireplace higher and stored watch. The typhoon outdoor had dwindled, leaving the sound of the river distant and occasional. She became asleep before lengthy, respiratory, sluggish, and shallow. Underneath the blanket, Cole sat lower back within the chair, staring into the hearth. He felt the weight in his chest, the identical one he'd carried since leaving at the back of the blood and noise of the Path cities. He failed to recognize who she was or what kind of hell she'd been thrown from. However, he knew this. He wasn't going to permit her die here. The wind outdoor shifted once more, carrying the steady sound of the river that had nearly taken her. For the first time in an extended whilst, Cole Maturin did not feel absolutely by myself. The morning came gradual, light, mild, creeping through the cracks within the cabin partitions. The fireplace had burned right down to embers, and the air had the sharp chill of dawn. Cole sat in the chair in which he'd slept upright most of the night, one arm resting on his leg, eyes half open but alert. He hadn't supposed to nod off in any respect. While he appeared in the direction of the cot, she turned into wakeful. Ayanna's eyes have been opened, following him quietly. Her dark hair turned into dry now, fanned over the pillow, and the blanket included her as much as her collarbone. She did not speak before everything. He saw her hands circulate below the fabric, testing her fingers, her hands. Then she tried to transport her legs. Nothing took place. Her face went still. He watched, uncertain if he must look away or stay. She pressed her palm tough in opposition to her thigh, alternatively harder, until frustration tightened her jaw. Finally, she turned her head closer to him. "You say I safe," she said, voice gentle but clean. "I'm not safe. No stroll, no tribe, no home." Cole stood and poured water from the tin pitcher right into a cup. "You are alive," he stated, putting it beside her. "This is secure sufficient for now." She failed to drink? "Why, you are saying?" He hesitated. That question had sat in his chest because the night earlier then. "Failed to consider it," he said. "Eventually noticed you within the river. Could not simply stand there." Her eyes searched him like she failed to pretty trust him. Or perhaps she did not understand the sort of guy who could act without reason. After a long pause, she whispered, "My humans throw me. Say I convey horrific spirit. I fall from horse, backbone destroy. They say curse." He felt something twist in his stomach at her phrases. He'd recognized Apache camps all through his scout days, visible how they lived tough beneath pressure from both the military and hunger. But the idea of them turning on certainly one of their own made his arms clench. "You fell from horse," he stated. "That's no curse." She didn't argue. Her gaze went again to the fire. Cole moved around the small cabin, maintaining himself busy. He set beans to soak, then went outdoor to split wood. Each strike of the awl cleared his thoughts. He notion about her tale, approximately how a person could be left to drown due to fear or superstition. He thought approximately the load of her whilst he'd carried her up the ridge, mild as a toddler, but heavy with something he couldn't name. Inner, she listened to the sounds he made, the regular rhythm of reducing, the door creaking, the fire popping. Whilst he came back in, she became sitting upright, bracing herself on her elbows. "You stay alone," she stated, eyes shifting over the room. "The gear, the saddle, the rifle by using the door." "Yeah," he replied, "some time now." "Why?" He did not examine her whilst he replied. "Got tired of combating different people's battles." She watched him quietly. "You soldier." He hesitated earlier than nodding. "Turned into long term ago. Drove farm animals after that, then stopped doing both." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It changed into simply there, just like the space among them belonged to each. He surpassed her. A bowl of heat broth helped her preserve it consistent. Her arms had been sturdy sufficient to boost it, however still shook. When she completed, she seemed around once more, her eyes deciding on the window, then on him. This your land. Bought it years returned, he said. Built this cabin myself. She nodded slowly, taking it in. You stay some distance from Metropolis. Do not like city a good deal, he stated, his tone flat. Then he introduced almost as if to himself. Don't like human beings plenty both. That made her smile for the primary time. A faint, unsure curve of her lips. Identical. Cole looked at her for a second. There has been something in that small expression that softened the rims of the room. He failed to say it out loud, but he felt it. The way she already changed the air round him simply by way of being there. Later, at the same time as she slept again, he sat out of doors on the porch steps. The sky become clear now, the air sharp and smooth after the typhoon. He notioned approximately what to do next. He could not send her to Metropolis. The parents there would not take kindly to an Apache woman, crippled or not. The nearest doctor became 50 miles off, and the roads have been dust. He ran a hand via his hair, staring down on the river beneath. He'd planned to spend the winter by myself, solving the barn roof, tending the herd, preserving his head low till spring. However, matters failed to constantly stay as deliberate. Whilst he went lower back interior, she become awake once more, eyes following him. You suspect send me away? She asked quietly. He stopped near the stove. I do not know what I'll do but, he said. She swallowed, her voice almost a whisper. In case you sand, I die. He met her eyes. There was no drama in her tone, simply reality. It landed hard in the room, heavier than any promise. Cole nodded slowly. Then you will live for now. Something in her face eased, even though she failed to smile. She simply looked at him with quiet information, like she'd already recognized what his answer might be. As night time fell once more, the fire burned steady. She lay inside the cot, her eyes drifting close. Cole sat nearby, oiling his rifle out of addiction. The cabin creaked with the cold. Neither spoke. He wasn't positive what sort of trouble might comply with her, or if anybody could come. Looking, however, as he watched her breathe, he knew one element for sure. Anything had started out on that riverbank wasn't completed. And for the first time in years, Cole Madden felt the burden of every other lifestyle's relying on him and failed to run from it. The times that observed had been bloodless and quiet. The typhoon had handed, leaving the air clear and sharp, and the river underneath had calmed right into a sluggish, consistent contemporary. Cole rose early each morning, similar to always, but now the sound of his boots not echoed on my own on the floorboards. Each time he turned from the range or the door, she became there, unsleeping, looking him, silent but present. Ayanna was getting more potent. She may want to sit up longer, pass her arms more freely, even drag herself short distances along the ground while she needed to. It wasn't a lot, but it changed into something. Cole had constructed a frame from scrap lumber to help her prop herself beside the fire. He did not say it, however he sought after her grit, the way she refused to be vain, even when her body failed her. That morning, as he poured coffee into a tin cup, she broke the silence. You restoration what every day, she said, her English halting but regular. You know, rest paintings continues me immediately. He spoke back. Straight. He glanced at her, the nook of his mouth twitching. Way do not lose myself. She studied him a second, then nodded. You lose before, he iced over, stuck off protect via her directness. He advised her little approximately himself. Handiest that he used to paintings with livestock. That he'd been a soldier as soon as. He hadn't said why he lived out right here by myself. Yeah, he stated after pause. Lost enough, she failed to press him. However, the appearance she gave stated she understood extra than maximum might. She knew something approximately being cut off from what you were. Later that day, at the same time as the wind rose out of doors, she requested some other query that have been putting since the day he determined her. You not afraid? He regarded up from mending a bridle strap. Of what? Me, she said certainly. My humans, you help Apache woman. Many white men no do that. Cole set the strap apart, rubbing the lower back of his neck. I worked close to Apache lands earlier than. Saw lots of awful on each aspects. You do not strike me as problem. Her eyes held his for a second. Testing the load of his words, I not cursed. Then he shook his head. You're just harm, Ayanna. It truly is all. Something small changed in her face. Then, like a wall, decreasing simply enough for him to peer at the back of it. It wasn't pretty a grin. However, the tension that had lived in her jaw due to the fact that nighttime started to ease. By means of night, the snow started out to fall. Mild at the beginning, then heavier, protecting the ridge in white. The cabin packed with the odor of wood smoke and beans simmering at the stove. Cole helped her to the small desk. Placing her on a stool, he braced with blocks so she would not slide. She stirred the pot whilst he cut bread, the two of them running in silence. Listeners may have wondered what saved them from speaking more, but words were not what either of them trusted. Cole had spent years around guys who lied for a dwelling. Outlaws, officials, ranchers who'd smile, even as dishonest you blind. Words have been clean, work wasn't. Ayanna understood that without having it explained. Each small motion between them, her hand steadying the bowl, his arm achieving past her for the kettle, spoke what talk could not. Once they ate, she said softly. You no longer requested me Cole earlier then. He looked at her throughout the desk. Didn't suppose you were geared up to give it. Her lips curved faintly. Ayanna, she stated manner everlasting blossom. But I suppose no bloom left. He checked out her for a protracted moment. Nonetheless respiration, ain't you? She nodded as soon as, then perhaps still bloom, he introduced quietly. The silence that observed wasn't awkward. It settled over the room like the snow out of doors, gentle, unspoken, however alive. That night, after she slept, Cole sat by way of the hearth once more. He concept approximately the questions that hung over them each. What had really happened together with her tribe, whether or not anyone would come searching out her, and what he might do in the event that they did. He additionally thought approximately the life he'd constructed out right here, one supposed to preserve him other than every person, and how without problems she'd stepped into it without asking permission. He wasn't sure if it become pity, responsibility, or something he didn't but have a call for. But he knew this lots. Sending her away wasn't an option anymore. She needed care, and he wished something to care for. Outside, wolves held someplace deep inside the valley. Interior, the fire mild flickered throughout the partitions, tracing the lines of the small cabin that had once been his only employer. Now there had been 2 mugs by the range, blankets close to the cot, and a quiet warm temperature that hadn't existed right here in years. As he drifted to sleep inside the chair again, he heard her whisper faintly in the dark, talking in her own tongue. He did not understand the phrases, however he stuck one sound. His call said smooth and grateful for a person who hadn't been thanked in years. It felt just like the begin of something that scared him more than the river ever had. By the time the following week passed, the ridge turned into buried beneath snow. The cabin stood half-hidden under the white weight, smoke curling constant from its chimney. The hurricane out of doors failed to hassle Cole a great deal. He had lived through worse, however this iciness felt different. He wasn't on my own anymore, and each preference he made had to account for a person else. Internal, Ayanna had settled into the rhythm of the cabin. She should pass herself from the cot to the chair along with her fingers now, and she or he helped with something work she ought to reach. She'd taken care of beans, patched torn shirts with cautious stitches, and floor coffee together with her arms, regular towards the stone. Her legs did not flow, but her spirit did, and Cole noticed it greater every day. The listeners might have puzzled how she managed to live to tell the tale all those weeks earlier than he determined her. How a paralyzed woman could have lasted so long on her personal. That morning, whilst the snow out of doors softened the light, he requested her that question for the first time. How do you live earlier than the river? She paused, the movement of her fingers stopping over the fabric she become mending. A man from my tribe, old uncle, he deliver me food for a time. When he die, they prevent. I move slowly to creek for water. No food, no people. In the future they arrive. I think maybe they create a cyst. They are saying, Spirit, take my legs. Say I make illness. They bring me to water. Throw. Her voice failed to shake, however, the words did something to him. He tightened his jaw, watching the ground for a long whilst. They notion killing you'll fix them, he said quietly. Yes, she said, however I nonetheless listen. He nodded, meeting her eyes. Damn right you're. It turned into the primary time she'd heard him curse, and something in his tone made her lips twitch, the faintest spark of enjoyment, like existence reclaiming area where an ache used to stay. That night, as he chopped out of doors, he saw a form down the ridge, a horse shifting slow through the snow. His hand went his gun by means of instinct. Travelers not often came this manner, unless they had been lost or looking for something. The pony stopped near the fence line, a person dismounting, wrapped in a long coat and headband. Cole waited till he were given close enough to peer his face. It become vintage Caleb Traz, the trader who ran a small outpost 15 mi east. Failed to assume to look everybody out this manner, Cole stated, decreasing his shield. Caleb nodded, stamping snow from his boots. Had a shipping for a few parents down the river. Figured I'd check if you have been nevertheless breathing. Cole smirked faintly. Nevertheless am. Caleb looked beyond him closer to the cabin. Heard a rumor out in town. Said you took in certainly one of them Apache ladies. Real. Cole's jaw tightened. Who is pronouncing that? Couple drifters in Pine Ford. Noticed smoke from this ridge, and said perhaps you were not as by myself as he was. Cole failed to solution right away. He simply said she needed help. It truly is all. Caleb gave him a long appearance. Component curious, component careful, helps one aspect, troubles another. Oldsters obtainable don't forgive smooth. I didn't ask for his or her forgiveness, Cole stated. Caleb nodded, understanding sufficient, no longer to push similarly. He surpassed over a small sack of espresso and salt. You will need to hold that hearth robust. Weather's turning terrible once more. Whilst Caleb rode off, Cole stood there for a long term, looking the horse disappear into the white. The unease sat heavy in his chest. If guys in Pine Ford were already speak me, it intended someone had seen Iana. Or might quickly. He went lower back inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. Iana regarded up from her chair. A person come, he hesitated before answering. Trader just passing through. She studied his face, knowing there was greater. You worry, she said quietly. Cole failed to deny it. This land's now not typed to strangers. Word spreads fast. Folks in town, maximum of them do not see proper from wrong on the subject of your humans. She regarded down, her voice calm however company. I not cross back. He stepped closer, resting a hand at the desk beside her. You won't, I will see to that. Something in his tone carried a weight he hadn't meant to reveal. She looked up, her eyes catching his, and for a long moment neither spoke. The fireplace popped between them. He felt something shift, something quiet however actual, a line crossed, a promise made without words. Later, whilst she slept, Cole sat near the window, looking the snow drift against the glass. He notion about what he'd stated. He supposed it every phrase, but the reality changed into, he did not realize how to guard her if guys came asking. The town slightly tolerated him, a quiet man with no family and a past he never stated. An Apache girl below his roof might stir the sort of communicate that in no way ended well. He regarded over at her dozing form, her face tender in the glow of the firelight, and felt a pulley he failed to know how to name, something heavier than pity, deeper than obligation. She had grown to be part of the place, a part of his days. The cabin didn't feel hollow anymore. The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was complete of something consistent, something alive. Cole leaned returned, the fireplace's warm temperature brushing his face. He had lived years with no one to reply to, no motive to live, but as he watched her breathe, he found out the idea of her being taken or leaving changed into something he could not be given. Outdoor, the wind howled throughout the ridge, sweeping via the bushes like a warning. Inside, the man who as soon as swore in no way to care again had already damaged his personal vow without noticing. The wind carried tougher the following morning, riding sheets of snow against the cabin walls. Cole was up earlier than dawn, pulling on his coat and stepping outside to check the cattle. He moved gradual, each step sinking deep within the glide. The typhoon had buried most of the fence line and left the roof heavy with white. His thoughts stayed busy with work. However, under it all was that identical gnawing idea. If the traitor should find his way right here, so could others. While he came back in, the fireplace had died low. Ayanna sat unsleeping in her chair near the stove, wrapped in a blanket, hair unfastened over her shoulders. She regarded War, naught but alert. He noticed the manner her eyes observed him, studying the tension in his moves. "You understand? Sleep a lot," she said softly. "Should say the same for you," he answered, kneeling to stoke the fireplace. "I pay attention, storm. Assume perhaps roof fall." He gave a faint smile. "If it falls, we're going to rebuild." It wouldn't be the primary time. Her gaze lingered on him a second longer earlier than she spoke once more. "The person who come yesterday, you trust him, Caleb." He shrugged as lots as anyone. He is now not cruel, just curious. But phrase travels rapid, and guys communicate faster after they drink. Ayanna peered down, her arms twisting the edge of the blanket. "If guys come, they take me once more." "No," he stated, too speedy, then quieter, "no longer whilst I am status." It wasn't simply something he stated to calm her. He meant it, somewhere between that frozen night by way of the river and this morning silence. His feel of obligation had turned into something else, something heavier. Cole moved about the room, checking the windows, the latch at the door, the rifle hanging with the aid of the wall. He stuck himself doing it once more later that day, listening too regularly for sounds outdoor, glancing on the ridgeline via the window. He hadn't realized until then how much his lifestyles had shifted in only some weeks. The arena beyond that cabin felt smaller now, meaner. He'd built his lifestyles on distance. Distance from the struggle, from human beings, from the matters he could not restore. But now there has been someone inside his partitions who wished him to live near. By midday, the typhoon broke. The light changed, smooth and gold towards the snow. He went to the shed and got here back carrying a tough wood frame. "What that?" Ayanna requested. "Something I have been operating on," he said, placing it close to her. "Figured you may use some freedom." It turned into a small chair with handles, tough however strong. He'd original it from scrap lumber, attaching small wheels from a vintage plow. "You may circulate less difficult with it," he explained. Her eyes widened as she ran her hand alongside the brink of the timber. "You are making for me." Regarded approximately time, he stated awkward below her stare. "You shouldn't have to tug yourself everywhere." She looked at the chair, then at him. "You type man, Cole Madron." He shook his head. "Just a guy who can construct." Nonetheless, whilst he helped her into the chair, and she rolled ahead for the first time, the sound of her quiet chortle stuffed the cabin in a manner he hadn't heard before. It caught him off defend, made something inside him loosen. She moved around the room, slow however decided, touching things she'd only seen from her cot. The shelf of gear, the window body, the stack of books by means of the door. She stopped beside the window, searching out on the limitless white. "I forget world huge," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "It's not as massive because it used to be." "Why you live right here?" she asked suddenly. "You strong man, you could stay anywhere." Cole leaned against the wall thinking about that. "I used to think peace supposed running from the whole thing. Turns out walking just makes you tired." She nodded slowly. "No." How extra than he expected. "You locate peace here." He looked at her for a long second, maybe starting to. The day passed quiet. He worked on patching the roof at the same time as she prepared stew. Their moves had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, like they had been sharing space tons longer than some weeks. When he got here returned inside, the odor of cooking filled the cabin, wealthy in heat. They ate together via the hearth. For the first time, due to the fact she'd arrived, she failed to appear to be a stranger in his home. The blanket draped round her shoulders seemed a door it belonged there. Her face had coloration once more. "You're human beings," he said after a while. "You think I'll look for you?" She shook her head. They are saying I did. Spirit already long past. In the event that they see me now, they pull away. Then you definitely you're loose, he said. She looked at him serious, loose however nowhere to go. He met her eyes. You then stay here until you make a decision in any other case. She studied him a long second, as though weighing the reality in his voice. Then she nodded once. I live. The fireplace crackled between them. Out of doors, the snow had stopped, leaving the world still and white. Cole leaned again in his chair, watching her arm's relaxation calm at the blanket, the faint light from the hearth portray her skin in amber. It hit him then how quiet the arena had grown to be, and what kind of that quiet meant now. There has been no loneliness in it, no pain, simply the steady sound of respiration, the crack of wooden, and the sensation of something new taking root. Ayanna stuck him searching and gave a faint knowing smile. He looked away, pretending to regulate the stove, but his coronary heart thudded harder than it need to have. The night time settled slow. While she ultimately drifted to sleep, Cole sat there a long time, observing the fireplace till it burned low. He idea of the lifestyles he'd lived earlier than her. Empty days, empty nights, a man looking ahead to nothing. Then he seemed toward the cot in which she slept, her dark hair unfold across the pillow, and he realized the waiting became over. Anything came subsequent, city rumors, hassle, snow, or silence. He knew one issue for sure. He wasn't letting her face it by myself. The days after the typhoon surpassed with the atypical calm. The snow outside had hardened right into a white crust that stuck the morning light like glass. Interior, the cabin breathed in a different way now. The air no longer felt a door, it belonged to at least one guy. There were mugs by way of the stove, 2 units of footprints near the door, 2 lives circling each other in quiet rhythm. Cole had continually labored with purpose, but currently that motive had shifted. He wasn't simply maintaining himself alive anymore. He was making sure Ayanna had what she wanted. He delivered in water, chopped timber, and set traps for rabbit. She organized meals, repaired clothes, and stored the hearth regular. Their international had narrowed all the way down to survival and silence, and by hook or by crook that felt right. Listeners may have questioned whether each person had come looking for her, her tribe, the metropolis's people, someone from her beyond. Cole had puzzled too. Each time the wind carried a sound that did not belong, but weeks surpassed without a sign. The river underneath become frozen at its edges, the closest road buried. It turned into as though the sector had sealed them off, leaving them to themselves. It strengthens memory, repaired a deascles trsp. Ayanna spoke quietly. You now not UNNECES requested what IIRY con you. He appeared up amazed, did not think I needed to. You observed I afraid, she stated, first days yes. You quiet man, usually seem like storm and head. However you understand hurt me. No, even as soon as. Cole's jaw tightened barely. You've got seen guys who did. Her eyes darkened too many. She paused, palms tracing the seam of the blanket. Earlier than the river, there has been one man who said he loved me. Once I fall from horse, he named me damaged issue. Say no female, if no walk, he inform others I cursed, that is why they flip. Cole's grip on the strap stopped. He did not communicate for some time. Whilst he did, his voice was low. Sounds like he changed into the one cursed. She studied his face, her eyes smooth however sharp. You now not consider and curse. He shook his head. I have seen terrible men and correct men, seen storms and battle. In no way noticed a curse do a damn component that people fail to do first. Something in her expression modified. Component alleviation, element surprise. You exceptional kind, she stated quietly. He leaned back in the chair. Don't know approximately that. Just tired of looking humans get thrown away. The following morning, he woke early to discover her already up, sitting near the window in her chair. The sky turned into gray and frost laced the glass. She becomes stitching something small and cautious. Portions of his antique blouse she'd reduce into strips, When he asked what she become doing, she said, "You always restore things, now I restoration you one." She held up what looked like a small pouch so tight with leather, based thread. "In your tobacco," she stated. You took it from her hand, difficult palms brushing hers for only a moment. "It's suitable work," she smiled faintly. "You hold so you not forget, woman, you shop." He looked at her, the load of her words sinking deeper than he expected. "I couldn't forget about if I tried." Because the day wore on, he busied himself checking traps along the tree line. While he lower back, he discovered her studying one in every of his antique books. Her brow furrowed as she traced the words with her finger. "You study English?" he requested, amazed. "Examine from missionary female," she stated without searching up. "A long term ago, earlier than tribe, ship her away." He crouched beside her, pointing a line within the book. "That word there, it manner freedom." She repeated it softly, as if trying out how it felt on her tongue. "Freedom," then she smiled, small but positive. "I like that word." That night time they ate with the aid of the fireplace. The room heat regardless of the cold urgent against the partitions. The speak drifted to small matters. The odor of the pines after rain, the way coyotes called at night. She requested about the scars on his palms, and he advised her bits of his past he hadn't said out loud in years. About the warfare, about losing men he'd called brothers, about how silence turned into the most effective factor that ever responded again. "You suspect you are finished with fighting," she stated after some time. "I concept so," he admitted. "But perhaps fighting just changes form. Nowadays, it's no longer men I'm preventing, it is myself." She reached out slowly and located her surrender his, her fingers warm against the hard of his knuckles. He failed to move, neither spoke. The hearth popped once, throwing light across the floor. For the first time in years, Cole failed to experience the weight of his past pressing down. He felt something regular as an alternative, just like the floor had stopped moving below him. Out of doors, the night deepened. A chilly wind slid down the ridge, brushing against the cabin walls. However inner, the air stayed warm. Ayanna's hand stayed on his. Whilst she finally withdrew it, he felt the absence like a pulse. Before he turned in for the night time, he checked the door one final time. The wind had picked up once more, the type that carried sound a ways, someplace past the ridge. He heard the echo of hooves, faint, remote, however real. He stood there for an extended, even as, listening. Then he appeared back at her, slumbering by means of the fireplace, and something in his chest tightened. Trouble is probably coming, but he knew one factor for sure. Something it turned into. He wasn't running from it this time. The river had taken one life from her and nearly claimed his peace along with it. However now, standing in that cabin's quiet mild, Cole Madron knew precisely what he'd become willing to fight for. With the aid of sunrise, the sound of hooves became no longer a dream. Cole had heard them again simply before dawn, nearer this time, consistent and planned. Whoever became driving became not lost. He stood by means of the window, the rifle in his hands, his breath clouding the glass as he watched the ridge underneath. The music had been faint through the snow. However, there had been as a minimum horses, perhaps 3, moving sluggish alongside the frozen riverbank. He watched until they vanished into the tree line, then grew to become in the direction of the hearth, in which Ayanna became stirring wakeful. She noticed the rifle first, then his face. A person come, he nodded once. Might be nothing. Will be men from Pine Ford. I do not find it irresistible either way. Her eyes darkened. They search for me. Don't know but, he said. However, if they are, they may find the incorrect cabin to knock on. He attempted to sound consistent, but the weight in his voice gave him away. The humans of Pine Ford weren't acknowledged for mercy, particularly closer to Apache. They referred to as it justice when it applicable them and savagery whilst it failed to. If word had spread that Cole Madron, a person already half an interloper, changed into harboring one, it would draw interest he didn't want. He moved through the cabin, checking the door, the window latches, the returned wall in which he'd patched antique bullet holes years in the past. His hands shook handiest barely. Ayanna watched him in silence, her eyes following every motion. "You combat before," she said quietly. He checked out her too often. She nodded, expertise without asking. "You no longer need to fight once more?" "No," he said. "However, I will if I need to." Even as he loaded the rifle, she turned her chair in the direction of him. "If guys come, I disguise." He shook his head. "No. If all people comes, they'll see we got nothing to cover. You are right here because I want you here. That is the reality." Ayanna stared at him for a long time. "You risk your lifestyles for me. Why, Cole?" Prevent what he was doing. For a moment, all he should listen was the ticking of the stove steel cooling. "Because it's the proper damn issue," he said quietly. "And due to the fact I would instead die doing something that topics than live like I used to, pretending I didn't care who were given left behind." That solution hung heavy within the small room. She seemed down, her voice slightly a whisper. "Then I'm hoping they in no way find us." He failed a solution. He did not need to. The day moved sluggish after that. The wind outdoor carried no new sounds, but each of them stayed irritating. Cole stepped out best as soon as to accumulate timber. When he lower back, she had organized coffee and laid out 2 bowls of stew. He could tell by using the look in her eyes that she understood extra than he stated, that she knew what turned into coming, and that she wasn't afraid. As nighttime fell, he instructed her the tale she'd never requested for, but possibly puzzled approximately for the reason that day he discovered her. "You asked once why I came out right here," he stated. "Why stay on my own?" She nodded, watching him from her chair. "I used to trip with guys who had been paid to kill other guys. Did not count number why. Did not matter who. I told myself I used to be doing it for a purpose. Money, justice, some sort of order. But I was just going for walks from the noise in my very own head. One job went horrific. My friend, closest issue I had to a brother, took a bullet meant for me. After that, I rode west and saved going until there has been no person left to bury." He rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Idea, I should stay quiet up here. But quiet do not restoration what is damaged. It just makes you overlook it's nonetheless there." Ayanna did not interrupt. While he completed, she said softly, "You restoration me, perhaps I repair you." He met her gaze. "You already did." The quiet that accompanied wasn't heavy. It became the kind that settles between people who finally stated what needed saying. That night time, snow began once more, faint in the beginning and then thicker, muffling each sound outdoor. Cole sat close to the fireplace even as Ayanna slept, the rifle leaning by his chair, but he did not feel the equal kind of fear anymore. If the one's riders got here, he'd deal with them. He wasn't defensive a secret. He turned into shielding his domestic. Close to midnight, the dogs barked from the shed. Cole stood, heart tightening. Through the frost-blurred window, he noticed 2 shapes drawing near, the glow of lanterns transferring among the timber. He crossed the room in 2 strides and checked the rifle. "Stay here," he informed her. "Cole," she said softly. "Please not kill." He gave her a glance that changed into half promise, half warning. "Most effective if they make me." He stepped outdoor into the bloodless, his boots crunching over snow. The wind hit his face like glass. 2 men had been arising the ridge, one on horseback, one mane another horse behind him. The nearer they got here, the more he diagnosed the person in the front. Caleb Traz, the traitor. Cole diminished the rifle slightly. "You have an addiction of displaying up uninvited." Caleb, the older guy, raised a hand. "Failed to come for trouble. Came to provide you with a warning. Couple of deputies from Pine Ford are heading this manor. They heard speak you're harboring a lady from the reservation. Stated they may be coming to test." Cole's jaw tightened. "How lengthy?" "The next day morning. Maybe quicker," Caleb stated. "They're drinking first. You know how that is going." Cole nodded, his mind already turning over alternatives. "Respect the warning." Caleb hesitated before leaving. "Cole, I don't know what is taking place between you and that female. But if she's harmless, you higher have evidence. Pineford ain't kind to men who absorb outsiders." Cole's voice came out flat. She's now not an interloper here. Caleb gave him one lengthy look, then became his horse go into reverse the path. When a sound of hooves dwindled, Cole went back interior. Ayanna was nevertheless wakeful, her eyes fixed at the door. They arrive, he nodded. Tomorrow. Her voice trembled slightly. They take me away. No, he said, I won't allow them to. Then they kill you, she said. He knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. Then they should earn it. Her arms tightened around his. I no longer need you die for me. He appeared up at her, his voice consistent. You gave me something to live for again. It is no longer dying, Ayanna. This is living right for the primary time. The wind pressed in opposition to the cabin walls, sporting a low, distant thunder. He did not recognize if it changed into the storm or the echo of horses on frozen floor. However, either manner, he knew what the next day might bring. He spent the rest of the night preparing, shifting the rifle close to the window, checking the hearth, securing the door. When he finally sat down beside her again, her eyes have been open watching him. You tired? He asked. No, she stated softly. I assume maybe peace before hurricane. I feel it here. She pressed a hand to her chest. He nodded. Knowledge exactly what she intended. Neither of them slept. Whilst the primary light of morning broke over the ridge, the snow became still falling, sluggish, quiet, endless, and down underneath, the faint shapes of riders regarded through the fog. 3 this time, transferring closer to the cabin with purpose. Cole stood, his hand tightening around the rifle. The sound of hose grew louder, clearer. He took one remaining observe Ayanna. She met his eyes, calm and unflinching, and whispered, I live. I recognize, he said. Because the horses stopped outside, Cole stepped to the door. Something ghosts of his beyond none, the less lived in him. Something guilt he carried. They fell silent now. All that mattered became the lady by way of the fireplace, the lifestyles that they had constructed out of not anything, and the truth that for the primary time in years, he wasn't running from fight. He becomes standing for something really worth saving. The knock got here difficult against the wood. Cole exhaled as soon as, slow, and opened the door. The door swung open to the gray morning, and 3 men stood outside, their horses' respiratory steam into the bloodless. Snow clung to their hats and coats, and their boots sank deep into the glide. The man in the front wore a deputy's badge pinned crooked to his vest, his face crimson from drink and cold alike. The alternative 2 hung lower back, rifles slung across their shoulders. Cole failed to pass from the doorway. Morning, the deputy said, his tone hard suspicious. Calls Briggs, you Cole Madron. I am, Cole said calmly. Briggs glanced over his shoulder towards the cabin, eyes narrowing as if he ought to see via the walls. We heard you obtain corporation up here. Apache lady. Folks in Pine Ford are curious if it truly is genuine. Cole's voice stayed calm. You rode all this way to gossip. Briggs gave a humorless grin. No longer gossip. Mad-in-law, there has been problem near the reservation. Farm animals gone missing. Traps cut. Even a fireplace set close to one of the mining camps. Apache tracks all over the vicinity. If you got one here, she's going to reply some questions. Cole's hand tightened on the threshold of the door, however his face stayed blank. You're barking up the wrong ridge. Ain't been any Apache round here given that winter started out. Briggs tilted his head. It really is so mind if we look inside just to be sure. You acquire a warrant, do not need one, Briggs stated, stepping ahead. No longer while it's tribal business. Cole blocked his way. The air among them thickened. You step through that door uninvited, and you will discover it is not tribal commercial enterprise anymore. It's mine. For a long second, no person moved. Snow hissed softly in opposition to the roofs, and the horses shifted in the back of them, stamping at the bloodless. The 2 guys in the back of Briggs seemed uneasy, like they failed to need this to turn unpleasant. Briggs spat into the snow. You constantly had been a difficult bastard. Madden heard stories approximately you from the war. Men said you'll, as a substitute, shoot then talk. Cole's eyes didn't draw back. Relies upon who is asking. Briggs smiled thinly. However, there has been no humor in it. You obtained till sunset to trade her mind. If she's here whilst we come again, she's coming with us. You reflect on consideration on that. He grew to become his horse, motioning to the others, and they rode off via the snow, their silhouettes fading into the timber. Cole watched till they disappeared, then shut the door sluggish, his breath fogging inside the bloodless air. Ayanna turned into still by way of the fire, her eyes extensive, her palms gripping the fingers of her chair. "They take me," she whispered, "no longer if I'm able to assist it," he stated. "However they will be again." She swallowed tough. "If I depart now, they stop, they overlook." He shook his head. "You may not make it a mile on this cold. And that they might not forget. They'll simply come for both people later." She seemed down, voice trembling. "You fight them, they kill you. I do not need this." Cole crouched beside her. "You pay attention to me? You fail to do something incorrect. They are seeking out someone accountable. It's all. Guys like that. They do not need evidence, just a person weaker to point at. You live here, I will cope with them." She stared at him, tears brimming in her eyes, however not falling. "You recognize Afraid to Die?" He gave a small, worn-out smile. "I've been terrified of plenty of things in my lifestyles. Death stopped being one of them a long time in the past." She reached for his hand, palms trembling, however robust. "Then I afraid for you." He appeared down at her hand, her pores and skin heat towards his, and for a moment the world outside stopped present. He spent the subsequent hours preparing, no longer for a fight, but for a risk. He checked the rifle, the revolver, and the rounds. He accrued food, packed a small bag, and taken in more wooden for the fireplace. Ayanna watched him, saying nothing. She knew what it intended. While night time came, the wind dropped. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the sky clean and sharp. Cole sat through the window, eyes constant on the valley underneath, anticipating the glint of lanterns. They got here just beyond middle of the night. 3 of them once more, their lights moving gradual and constant up the ridge. He stood, grabbed his rifle, and looked at her. "Stay quiet. Do not move from that chair." She nodded, her face pale and the fire light. Whilst the knock came, it wasn't well-mannered this time. It turned into the hard, flat sound of men who'd already decided how the night time would stop. Cole opened the door midway. Briggs stood there again, face tight with cold and anger. "Did not parent you would do the clever issue," he said. Cole's voice stayed low. "I informed you there is no one right here you want to see." Briggs shifted his coat, revealing the pistol at his side. "Flow, Madden." Cole failed to. Behind him the hearth popped. One of the different guys craned his neck, looking to see interior. "There may be a person in there," he said. Briggs's mouth twisted. "So it's real." He reached for the door, and that became all it took. Cole progressed, his hand slamming the door open, difficult sufficient to knock Briggs again a step. The rifle came up. "Not fireplace, simply leveled. You acquire 3 seconds to turn around and get off this ridge," Cole said, voice bloodless as the air. "You return any nearer, and also you may not make it to your horses." Briggs's guys hesitated. The second muttered, "Allows go, Sam. Ain't well worth it." However, Briggs wasn't the type to backpedal. "You believe you studied, you may stand against the law." He hissed. Cole's voice failed to rise. "You're no longer the regulation outright here. You are simply some other guy with a gun." They stared at each different. The tension stretched thin as wire. Eventually, Briggs spat once more, his breath a cloud within the bloodless. "You will regret this, Madden." He grew to become, motioning his guys to comply with. They established their horses and rode off, disappearing into the black ridge underneath. Cole stayed inside the doorway long after they were long past, rifles nevertheless in his arms until the handiest sound left become the wind. Inner. Ayanna became crying quietly, now not from worry, but from something deeper, a grief that had no words. "They arrive again," she said softly. "Perhaps," he responded, "however, no longer this night." She looked at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "You defend me like I really worth something." "You are," he stated. "Don't permit anyone tell you specific." She reached out, and he got here closer. Kneeling beside her, she touched his face lightly, palms tracing the scar at his temple. "You fight for me," she whispered. "No one fight for me earlier than." Cole stuck her hand and held it there. Then I wager it is about time. The cabin changed into silent besides for the fire crackling. The typhoon outside had gone, but internal something else had settled. A delicate peace born from defiance. She leaned forward then, her breath trembling. He did not pass away. Her palms brushed his jaw, and when she spoke, her voice became slightly greater than a breath. You do not need keep me anymore. I stay due to the fact I need. Cole's chest tightened, the sort of feeling he hadn't allowed himself have in years. He reached up, his hard hand in opposition to her cheek. Then live, he said quietly. She closed the space among them, her lips locating his. It wasn't rushed or determined. It became real, grounded alive, the form of kiss that made every scar and silence really worth it. Once they ultimately broke aside, her forehead rested against his. You no longer by myself now, she stated softly. He nodded, eyes still closed. No, I'm not outside. The snow glittered within the faded moonlight. The hazard wasn't gone, however, for that night time. The world had long passed still. Inside the small cabin on the ridge, two broken souls had eventually stopped running from demise, from worry from themselves. Something came with the dawn. They might face it collectively. The morning came sluggish, pale, and bloodless. The light creeping over the snow like a thin sheet of silver. The air outdoor become silent. No voices, no horses, no trace of the men who had come the night time. Cole stood via the window, looking the line of the ridge for any sign of motion. His rifle leaned in opposition to the wall beside him, his jaw tight, however his eyes regular. He had slightly slept. Whenever he closed his eyes, he heard that knock again, noticed Briggs's face purple and twisted with arrogance. But now, within the quiet dawn, not anything stirred except the smoke curling from the chimney and the faint crackle of the fire at the back of him. Ayanna became unsleeping, her darkish hair loose around her shoulders, eyes following him quietly. They gone, she said, her voice from the night earlier then. For now, Cole spoke back. He grew to become from the window, on foot, closer to her. She appeared distinctive in the morning light, stronger in some way, in spite of the blanket drawn around her shoulders. You believe you studied they arrive returned, she requested. He hesitated before answering. Perhaps men like that do not like being advised no. However, if they do, I will be equipped. Her brow furrowed. You cannot combat entire town, Cole Madron. He gave a faint smile. Never tried preventing an entire metropolis earlier then. However, I'll fight for what's mine. She checked out him for a protracted moment, and then quietly, I am yours. The query stuck him off protect. He set his hat down at the table and crouched beside her. Now not due to the fact you owe me. No longer due to the fact I stored you. You are yours, Ayanna. However, in case you pick out to stay here, if you want this lifestyles with me, then yeah, you are mine in every manner that topics. Her eyes filled with tears, now not of worry, however of something deeper, recognition, alleviation, love she failed to recognize how to call. She reached for his hand. Then I stay. Cole nodded, gripping her hand in each of his. Then we start new. That morning they worked together as though nothing had passed off. He carried water from the nicely, added in greater firewood, and cleared the snow from the shed roof. Ayanna moved slowly across the cabin within the chair he had constructed her, mending his torn shirts, cooking breakfast, keeping herself busy like she belonged there, and she or he did. For the primary time, for the reason that river, laughter filled the cabin, small, quiet, but real. She teased him whilst he burned the bread, and he smirked while she scolded him for monitoring snow throughout the ground. The tension that had hung between them for weeks eased like thawing ice, yet under it all, each of them knew this peace changed into fragile. Ultimately, a person might ride up that ridge once more. By means of midday, the sun broke through, warming the snow just enough to make it sparkle. Cole determined to trip down towards the ridge to look if Briggs and his guys had camped close by. He saddled his horse, checking the cinch strap 2 times. I will be long past an hour, he advised her. Lock the door at the back of me. Do not open it for every person, however me. Ayanna nodded, however, stuck his sleeve before he may want to turn away. "You come," she said, her voice trembling barely. "Promise," he rested a hand on her cheek. "I will come lower back." She watched him experience off until he disappeared through the pines. The cabin fell silent again, besides for the wind. She waited, eyes constant at the window, coronary heart pounding at every sound. It was almost an hour later while she saw him returning, but now not alone. Some other rider trailed behind, older, driving slow. For a second her chest seized with fear. Then she saw Caleb's coat. Cole dismounted first, assisting the trader down. After they stepped in her, Caleb tipped his hat toward Ayanna. "Didn't imply to worry you, pass over. Idea Mataran might like to recognize Pine Ford's had its fill of hassle. Briggs may not be returned." Cole frowned. "What befell?" Caleb sighed. "Briggs attempted to elevate men to return when you." Sheriff instructed him to leave it. Stated the counties were given larger troubles than one quiet cowboy maintaining to himself. Heard Briggs rode east closing night, time mad as hell. Cole leaned again towards the wall, the breath he'd been holding finally easing out. "So it is accomplished." "'Pears that way," Caleb stated. "I advised the sheriff the woman you have here's no danger to every person." He failed to care enough to argue. Ayanna regarded from one man to the alternative, still processing the words. "He no longer come back." "No," Cole stated. "You are safe now." Caleb stayed for coffee, trading some substances earlier than heading back down the ridge. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt distinctive, lighter, freer. Ayanna wheeled her chair towards the window, looking the sky brighten above the snow. "So nobody chase us now, nobody," Cole stated. She checked out him, the corners of her lips turning up slowly. "Then we stay right here. Yes, no longer simply hide." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, we stay." Inside the days that observed, the air softened. The snow started out to soften round the edges of the cabin, and birds returned to the timber. Cole repaired the barn roof, patched the fence, and constructed a small ramp so she ought to circulate outside while the ground dried. Every night they sat via the fire, speaking extra than they used to, about her youth by means of the Verd River, approximately the brother she'd lost in a raid, about the sound of rain within the wilderness. He told her about the conflict, approximately the human beings he could not shop, approximately the long quiet years after. She listened, in no way judging, in no way soliciting for greater than he ought to give. As spring got here, the land got here alive once more. Wild plant life driven through the thawing floor, and the river ran speedy but clean. One morning, Cole discovered her via the porch, gripping the railing with her palms. She had managed to drag herself from the chair, her legs trembling, her palms shaking with effort. "Good day," he said, stepping forward. However, she held up a hand. "I attempt," she stated via clenched enamel. "I stand today." He moved closer, one arm geared up, but now not touching her till she nodded. Slowly, she observed her stability, her knees locking just enough to keep her weight. She swayed as soon as 2 times, then steadied. He caught his breath. "You're doing it." Her eyes packed with tears, however she smiled, real radiant. "I walk again in the future." He felt something wreck loose in his chest, something he hadn't permit himself feel in years. He pulled her close, holded her tight, her hands robust around his neck. "You may," he said quietly. "You already are." That night they sat collectively on the porch, the sun bleeding gold throughout the hills. The river below whispered via the rocks, the same river that had attempted to take her existence, and now carried the sound of peace. Ayanna leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You stored me as soon as," she stated. "Now we save each different." He wrapped his arm around her, his voice low. "It's how it's purported to be." The wind shifted, sporting the odor of pine and concept earth. The cabin behind them glowed with the fire internal. And for the first time, for the reason that both of them ought to keep in mind, there was not anything to run from, nothing to worry. Cole seemed out over the land that had as soon as been not anything but dust and silence, and saw lifestyles again. His herd grazing, smoke curling gently into the sky, and Ayanna beside him, alive, smiling, and home. He didn't need phrases to understand what it meant. The ridge, the river, the lady, it was all one now. Everything damaged in him had found its area. Because the closing light dwindled, she whispered, "You suspect we stay right here all the time?" He smiled, "As long as the river runs." And in that small cabin above the Verd, with the fireplace warm behind them and the sound of the world steady and alive again, Cole Madron finally discovered what he had been chasing all his existence. Peace that didn't come from walking, however, from staying. The river had taken her as soon as. Now it carried their story forward, calm and countless, right into a world that had finally forgiven them both.